Every now and then I get a chance to check in and talk to Peter Trent, and this time is no different. I read the op-ed in the Gazette the other day, and I thought, you know what? This is something we've been talking about sort of for a while now, given what's happening in the city. And people ask the question, well, maybe there should be someone running the city who has more of a business background. And then people look around and say, remember what Michael Bloomberg did for the city of New York, and others as well. And then the conversation just kind of dies. Well, Peter Trent, who served 5 terms as mayor of Westmount, led the Montreal demerger movement, and now occasionally writes in the Gazette, had a column on this the other day, and I thought we should basically try to dig in a little deeper because, Peter, you said we need far more entrepreneurs and business people to stand for election here. Thank you for being here, and explain why you think that why do we need that?
Well, I think the trouble is most people think that running a municipality or running a province or even running a country does not involve really the issue of supplying services and getting paid for those services. But indeed, that's what they're doing, and especially the city of Montreal. I think their budget is $7.2 billion. They take $7.2 billion from us in the form of taxes and other revenues, and they're supposed to give it back to us in the form of services, and it's supposed to be an efficient transaction. My thesis is that it's not. And the city is not well run because there's so few people who ever run anything that's in charge of the city. And of course, I'm talking about the political class, not necessarily the people who actually are bureaucrats. I'm talking about the political class. We very rarely get people with any solid business experience to lend a hand and say, look, this is how it should be done in an organization of this size. And the citizens are clients. They're not just people just to push aside because they get in your way. These are the people paying your salaries, and we should provide them with a very broad set of services, but most importantly, do it efficiently. And I just don't think there's enough people with business experience on Montreal Council, probably in the other councils, the rest of Quebec.
So with respect to what you wrote as well, we have to consider too, and I found this fascinating. I would not have imagined this to be the answer. You bring up the point of, well, if we paid our officials more, maybe we would encourage, business people to get involved. But your answer is no. All that would do would encourage those who are thinking of running for politics with better salaries to actually do that.
Aaron, this is a point I don't think people realize. That you can never pay business people enough, all right? Because people in the business sector normally make salaries that are, 10 times that people make in the public sector. So there's no way you're going to attract them simply by increasing your salaries that you offer your elected officials, because then all you do is get people who are with no business experience simply being attracted to the salary. So you don't attract business people with a higher salary because you can never match what they're currently making. And the point is, this is not a job. Generally speaking, we should be looking at the idea of people who run the city should be doing it to give back to their community. The same way they sit on boards. Most of us sit on various foundation boards, for example. We don't get paid. And some of those jobs can be extremely intensive. So I don't see. I think it was a mistake to raise salaries. Indeed, even now, and I'm going to make a few enemies when I make this statement, but I think that municipal elected officials, not just in Montreal but on the rest of the island, are overpaid. Simply because I'm afraid that it's the people for whom, say, $100,000 or $150,000 is a lot of money. And the business people, that is not going to be the case. You have to attract them by saying, look, it's your time to give back to the community. This is a challenge we have. You will have immense effect if you get on the city council of the city of Montreal in reducing, maybe not the spending, but certainly reducing inefficiencies and giving us more bang for our buck.
Yeah, you actually asked the question, does it make sense to pay blue-collar workers an average of $96,000 a year with benefits and 103 elected officials $182,000 each? Yep. I had no idea that's what they were making. That's what they're making?
But, Aaron, it's even more than 182 because that does not include the amounts of money they get from the STM, the CMM, and some other organizations. That's simply what the city of Montreal pays them. And I'm afraid this is the salaries of elected officials has drifted up far too high, especially the benefit side. A lot of that 182,000 is in benefits. And, I don't think you should be giving back to your community and then having fringe benefits like pension, health care, all this sort of stuff. This is not a job. This should be a vocation. This should be your way of saying, I love Montreal, I love my province, I love my country, I want to give back. And I'm not looking to make money at doing it. But we don't have anybody, or very rarely anybody, that runs with that attitude.
Some people might suggest you're dreaming in Technicolor, as they say, but I would ask, who would be the last person you think we had running this city who would have fit that bill?
I forget his name, but it was 100 years ago, 1926. That was the last time we had a very serious business person running the city of Montreal, 100 years ago. Ever since, we've had people with all sorts of background, but none that had any solid business experience. And so, and it really is a business venture. As I said, they tax people, and they return that tax in the form of service. That's not a political exchange.
Yeah.
That is strictly a monetary exchange.
I wonder, though, how, the old saying, it's hard to get or you can't put the genie back in the bottle. These people are making those amounts of money. We live in a society where every year, prices, salaries, everything goes up. I can't imagine one day someone walking in and saying, you know what, you're all making too much money for what you're doing. We have to change everything here. We need to change the dynamic in running this city, and here's how it's going to work. A person like that would never get elected.
It's true, but I think that the nostrum of when people say just simply pay them more and you'll attract a better class of elected official, that's what I'm fighting against. That notion is wrong. You actually wind up getting a lower caliber elected official the more you pay. That's my experience of 40 years of experience in local politics. So so the solution is not to pay them more in order to attract the private sector, but maybe we just simply freeze the salaries and get rid of all their perks, and then try to go after fewer. We don't need 103 people to run the city of Montreal. You go after fewer people, but people who've actually run things before in the private sector, or even possibly the public, but mostly the private sector.
By the way, you start your article, and I want to have enough time to just kind of finish with this. You begin by talking about Elon Musk, because he, of course, is now going to work in the Trump administration, along with Vivek Ramaswamy, I guess, to run a department called the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, right? About cutting extra jobs, about getting rid of those salaries that don't need to be there. And you point out, you know what, that may be a great idea in theory, but in principle, that's going to be almost impossible to do.
It's impossible for two reasons. First of all, that even if he achieves anything, it won't last. He's actually promised to deliver in the next year and a half. So clearly that means that things will go back to normal once he's gone. So that's the problem with that attitude. You have to have a permanent system of keeping those numbers down. The second problem he has, he's going after $6 trillion budget, of which something like $1.5 trillion is Social Security. You're going to start telling people you're not going to have any more Social Security payments? Another $1.1 trillion is defense and Veterans Affairs. Another trillion is Medicare. My God, they have a terrible Medicare system in the United States. And last of all, $1 trillion of interest. Well, so you've got right there $4.4 trillion out of $6 trillion. That I don't see how anybody can change that. So he's promising the moon. It's a bit like Trump saying, "I'm going to settle a problem between Russia and Ukraine in one day." That's the kind of magical thinking that's going to get us nowhere.
By the way, just before I let you go, do you actually think we have a municipal election coming up here in roughly a year, a little less than a year now, right? November of next year. We kind of muse from time to time about where's anybody saying, I want to run. I want to run against Projet Montréal and Valérie Plante, who will not be running again. Have you heard your ears to the ground? Is there anybody out there you think?
There's been a couple of names thrown about, but one with some experience in the private sector. But unfortunately, Aaron, I don't see that, because I think the trouble is it's gone so far. There's so few people with business experience on council now, they simply want to clone themselves. And, so it's going to be very hard to attract those kinds of people. People, let's say, are 40 or 50 years old. They can do it as a part-time job, which is, by the way, what a councillor should be treating the job as, is a part-time job, not a full-time job, except for the mayor, of course. Now, as for the mayor, Normally, you want somebody who's actually been on council before.
Yeah.
And that's a very limiting problem, because if you haven't been on council, you're going to take at least a year or two, even if you're brilliant, a year or two simply to know where things are and how to run things. And, running a municipality is still quite a bit different from running a company. And so you do need an acclimation period.
Well, okay. We'll leave it at that. So basically what you're saying is we're doomed. I understand. That's fine. Okay. Peter, thank you so much for the time. I always enjoy speaking with you. Thanks again.
My pleasure.
Peter Trent, former Westmount mayor. He makes some really good points. Where are those people, or where's that person, that business person who can sort of take it all, put it all together and do something with it? Looking around, don't see anybody.